Ilara was 24 when the world she knew was dismantled, not with a bang, but with the dry rasp of a solicitor's pen on paper. Her stepfather, Marcus, a man whose heart seemed to be made of the same cold, gray slate as the town bank, informed her of the sale over a breakfast she had cooked. He did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on the marmalade jar, as if it held more interest than the quiet demolition of her life. The house, her father's house, filled with the scent of his pipe tobacco and the phantom sound of his workshop, was sold. She had 30 days. He did not cry. He did not plead. Marcus was a man of ledgers and bottom lines, and sentiment was an unaccountable expense. "Your father left considerable debts," he stated, a well-rehearsed line that tasted of falsehood. "This clears the slate. There is a small remainder for you, $1,000. It should be enough to start somewhere else." Somewhere else. The words were as vast and empty as the northern plains. This house was the only somewhere she had ever known. Her father, a geologist and a master stonemason, had been her true north. He had not taught her needlepoint or social graces. He had taught her the language of the earth. He taught her how to read the story of a landscape in its strata, how to find the grain in a piece of granite, how to listen to the whispers of water moving deep underground. From him, she learned the quiet competence of hands that understood their work. He had bequeathed to her not a fortune in coin, but a wealth of skill, a way of seeing the world not as it was, but as it could be shaped and understood. In her room, amidst the careful packing of her few belongings, she held the one object that was truly hers. It was her father's plumb bob, a tool of elegant simplicity and profound truth. Forged from a solid piece of brass, it was heavy in her palm, its point worn smooth by a lifetime of finding the vertical. It was a tool for establishing a true line, for aligning oneself with the unwavering pull of the world's core. To her, it was more than brass. It was her father's guidance, a constant, silent reminder to find her own, unshakable center, no matter how the world tilted around her. The final day was a study in silence. Marcus handed her an envelope containing a bank draft for $1,000. His handshake was brief, his skin dry and cool. "Good luck, Ilara." The words were perfunctory, a social obligation met. She shouldered her canvas satchel, which held a change of clothes, a small set of drafting tools, her father's hand lens, and the heavy, comforting weight of the brass plumb bob in a leather pouch. She walked down the gravel path, the sound of her own footsteps the only farewell. She did not look back. She walked for 2 days, sleeping in haylofts and buying bread and cheese from small farmsteads. The money in her pocket felt like a dwindling hourglass. On the 3rd night, she took shelter from a driving rain in a tavern on the edge of the foothills, a place called The Weary Traveler. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool and stale beer. 2 grizzled prospectors at the bar were speaking in low tones, their words carrying over the din. "County's practically giving it away," one of them rasped. "The old Kane quarry. Tax auction. Nobody's touched it in 50 years. The other snorted. "Touched it? It's cursed. Kane went mad up there, they say. Vanished. The whole place is a death trap. That waterfall, the Widow's Veil they call it, claims a soul every decade or so, some fool looking for a shortcut. It's worthless, a pile of rock and bad memories." Ilara listened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. A quarry, a pile of rock. To the men it was a liability. To her it was a language she understood. She pictured the strata, the cleavages, the potential locked within the stone. The word worthless echoed in her mind, a direct challenge to everything her father had taught her. He had always said there was no such thing as worthless stone, only a lack of imagination. The next morning, she walked 20 miles to the county seat, a dusty, wind-blown town with a courthouse that seemed to sag under the weight of its own importance. The county clerk was a thin man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, a man who seemed perpetually annoyed by the public he served. When she inquired about the cane quarry, he gave her a look of pity mixed with contempt. That place? Little lady, you don't want that pile of rubble. He gestured vaguely towards a large, dusty map on the wall. It's Lot 73. 20 acres of unstable cliffs, a flooded pit, and a collapsed way station. The county's been trying to offload it for years. Back taxes come to $200. Alara's heart beat a steady, determined rhythm. I'll take it. The clerk blinked, then chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Suit yourself. It's your money to waste. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger and a deed form. The transaction was swift, the bureaucracy of ruin. He stamped the papers with a heavy, final thud. Her $1,000 became $800. The mocking smile never left his face as he handed her the deed. She folded it carefully and placed it in her satchel, the official transfer of a place no one wanted into the hands of a woman who had nowhere else to go. The journey to her new property took another full day on foot, following a barely there trail that climbed steadily into the rugged, pine-choked hills. The air grew thinner, cleaner. The sound came to her first, a low, constant rumble that grew into a roar as she drew closer. And then she saw it. The Widow's Veil. It was a magnificent, terrifying sight, a sheet of white water plunging over a sheer granite cliff face, crashing into a deep, turquoise pool 100 feet below. The quarry was carved into the land beside it, a great, gouged-out amphitheater of stone. Her heart sank. The prospectors hadn't been wrong. It was a ruin. The way station was a ghost of a building, its roof caved in, its stone walls crumbling. Rusted machinery, like the skeletons of forgotten beasts, lay half submerged in stagnant water. The scale of the dereliction was overwhelming. For a long, silent moment, she stood at the edge of the property, the deed feeling like a fool certificate in her pocket. The roar of the waterfall was a deafening mockery. Despair, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of her stoicism. But then her father's voice echoed in her memory. Look closer, Alara. The land always tells a story. You just have to learn how to read it. She took a deep breath, the air thick with the spray of the falls and the scent of wet rock and pine. She would not be beaten by a pile of stone. She would seek shelter, and then she would begin to read. The most intact structure was a small outbuilding, likely a foreman's shed, tucked against the cliff wall away from the main way station. Its roof was mostly gone, but 3 of its 4 stone walls were solid. It would have to be enough. She spent the rest of the daylight hours clearing it of debris, her hands quickly becoming raw. She used a fallen timber as a lever to move larger stones, her movements economical and precise, a dance of physics her father had taught her. By nightfall, she had a small, 3-walled shelter, a space she could call her own. She built a small fire, ate the last of her bread, and slept fitfully, the thunder of the waterfall a constant companion. The next week was a blur of methodical labor. She worked from dawn until dusk, fueled by a grim determination. Her first task was a thorough assessment of the main structure, the way station. It was built of the local gray granite, rough-hewn and sturdy, but time and neglect had taken their toll. She cleared the collapsed roof timbers and the years of accumulated leaves and dirt, slowly revealing the footprint of the building. It was here, while clearing the foundation of the massive hearth, that she found it. The anomaly. Most of the foundation stones were irregular, fitted together with the practical skill of a quarryman. But one, at the very back of the hearth, was different. It was a perfect ashlar block of a darker, finer-grained granite, its surface dressed to a near-perfect smoothness. It didn't belong. The local stone was igneous, born of fire. This block was metamorphic, forged by immense pressure, and it was not from this region. It was out of place, a single formal word in a sentence of colloquialisms. She ran her fingers over its cool, smooth surface. She tapped it with the handle of her hammer. The sound was a dull, solid thud. different from the resonant ring of the surrounding stones. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, replaced her weariness. Why would a builder use a single, superior, imported stone in a hidden part of a foundation? It made no sense structurally. It had to have another purpose. For 2 days, she studied the stone. She used her father's drafting tools to measure its dimensions, finding them to be an almost perfect 2-foot cube. She examined the mortar around it, picking at it with a small pry bar. It was a different composition, harder, more like modern cement than the lime mortar used on the rest of the structure. It was a seal, not a bond. On the 3rd day, she committed. Using a combination of levers and a small, hand-cranked winch she had salvaged and repaired from the debris, she began the painstaking process of moving the block. It was a problem of angles and forces, a puzzle of physics. She worked slowly, methodically, her breath misting in the cool air. The stone resisted, a silent, stubborn guardian. Finally, with a deep, grating groan of stone on stone, it shifted. Behind it was not solid earth, but a dark, hollow space. A cold, musty air, untouched for decades, washed over her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She lit a makeshift torch, a dry branch wrapped in oil-soaked rags, and peered inside. It was a narrow tunnel, just tall enough to crouch in. Its walls cut cleanly from the living rock of the cliff face. It led straight back, into the darkness. She hesitated for only a moment. Securing the plumb bob to her belt, she took a deep breath and crawled into the passage. The tunnel was short, no more than 20 feet, and it ended at a solid wall of rock. A dead end. Confusion and disappointment washed over her. But as she held the torch higher, she saw something she had missed. A small circular iron plate set flush with the stone floor, with a single square hole in its center. Beside it, chiseled into the rock, was a perfect circle with a vertical line running through its center, the geological symbol for a borehole. Her father had taught her this. It was a cap, and the square hole was meant for a key. Not a normal key, but a winding key for a winch or a capstan. She looked around the tunnel, her light dancing on the walls. There was nothing. Then her eyes fell to the floor again. The symbol. It was a clue. She thought back, trying to remember her father's lessons, the old quarryman's tricks he had spoken of. The plumb bob. It found the vertical. The symbol was a line through a circle. She stood up as much as she could, unhooked the brass tool from her belt, and let it hang. It swayed for a moment before settling into a perfect, still vertical line. She marked the point on the ceiling directly above the tip of the bob. Examining the spot, she found a tiny, almost invisible fissure. She inserted the tip of her pry bar and pushed. A section of the rock ceiling, no bigger than her hand, swung down on a hidden hinge, revealing a small cavity. Inside was a single object, a heavy T-shaped iron key. Her hands trembled as she fit the key into the hole in the floor plate. It was a perfect match. She turned it, putting all her weight into the effort. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, reverberating clang, something massive shifted within the rock. A low grinding sound began, the protest of a mechanism long dormant. The entire wall in front of her began to recede into the cliff, a perfectly balanced counterweight system moving a colossal stone door. The space it revealed was a vault, a room carved from the solid heart of the mountain. It was dry and still. In the center of the room sat 2 large, iron-banded chests. On top of one lay a leather-bound ledger and a geologist's hammer, its head a beautiful, polished steel, its handle worn smooth with use. The air was thick with the scent of dry paper, old leather, and something else, something metallic and inert. With a sense of profound reverence, she approached the chests. They were not locked. She lifted the heavy lid of the first one. Her torchlight glinted off a sea of gold. Coins, hundreds, perhaps thousands of them, minted decades ago, their faces showing forgotten presidents and eagles. The second chest was the same. It was a fortune, a staggering, impossible fortune. She sank to the floor, the sheer shock of it stealing the air from her lungs. But it was not the gold that held her gaze. It was the ledger. She picked it up, its leather cover cool and supple. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise, the script of an engineer. My name is Silas Kane. If you are reading this, you are either a very clever thief, or, as I hope, a kindred spirit who understands the language of stone. You have found my life's work and my life's regret. Alara read for hours, the torch burning low beside her. Silas Kane's story unfolded on the pages. He was a brilliant geologist and engineer, the man who had discovered this granite deposit and designed the quarry. He had poured his life into it, only to be betrayed by his business partner in the city, a man who had manipulated the books and forced him out, leaving him ruined. The world believed Silas Kane had thrown himself from the top of the widow's veil, a victim of despair, but he had not. He had faked his death, using his knowledge of the local caves and his engineering skill to disappear. Over the course of a year, living in secret, he had carved out this vault behind the waterfall, a place of perfect sanctuary. He had systematically recovered his hidden assets, this gold, and stored it here, a legacy for a future he would never see. His story was a mirror of her own, a tale of betrayal, of being cast out, of finding solace in the solid, honest company of rock and water. A passage near the end brought tears to her eyes, the first she had shed since leaving her home. "I have no heir of my own blood," Silas wrote. "My only legacy is this quarry, this home carved from the earth. I leave it all to the one who finds it, not by chance, but by skill. The clues I have left are not for the greedy, but for the patient, for the one who knows that the most valuable things are not on the surface. Do not let this place fall to ruin. Build a life here. Find the peace that I found in my solitude. The world outside is full of shifting lines and false measures. Here, in the heart of the mountain, you can find your own true vertical. This fortune is your tool. The purpose is yours to build." He had left her a blessing. A stranger, a ghost of a man dead for 50 years, had understood her more profoundly than anyone alive. She was not an outcast. She was an heir. The gold was not a treasure. It was a tool. The ruined quarry was not a worthless property. It was an inheritance. She closed the journal, her grief and loneliness replaced by a powerful, quiet sense of purpose. She had work to do. The discovery of the vault changed everything, and yet it changed nothing. Her routine remained the same: rise at dawn, work until dusk. But now her work was not born of desperation, but of vision. She began the true restoration of the way station, not as a temporary shelter, but as a permanent home. She made a trip to the nearest town, a day's ride on a sturdy mule she purchased from a farmer. In the general store, a practical establishment run by a no-nonsense woman named Agnes, she bought sacks of cement, lime, new tools, and provisions. She paid in cash, with one of the gold coins from the vault. Agnes's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the old currency, but she asked no questions, merely nodding with a newfound respect. Competence and the ability to provide for oneself were the only currency that truly mattered in these hills. The work on the house was slow and deliberate. She became a student of Silas Kane's craftsmanship. She saw how he had chosen each stone, how he had fitted them together to withstand the harsh winters. She did not just repair the walls. She learned them, understood them. She mixed her own mortar, her father's lessons on aggregate and binders guiding her hands. She used the plumb bob constantly, ensuring every new stone she set was true. The walls rose, solid and straight. Her next challenge was the roof. She needed heavy timbers, far too large for her to fell and mill herself. This led her to the town's blacksmith, a formidable man named Marek, his arms thick as tree limbs from a lifetime at the forge. He worked in a cloud of smoke and the ringing clang of hammer on anvil. He was a man of few words, known for his gruff demeanor. Elara did not approach him with a simple request. She brought a detailed drawing, a plan for the iron braces and straps she would need to secure the roof trusses. She had specified the type of steel, the dimensions, and the quenching method. Merrick looked at her sketch, his brow furrowed. He grunted, a sound of surprise. He took a piece of chalk and made a small correction to an angle on her design, explaining in a low rumble, "This will distribute the snow load better. Your design is good, but this is better." He saw not a young woman out of her depth, but a fellow craftsperson who understood the properties of her materials. He saw her calloused hands and the dusting of stone powder on her clothes. He saw competence. "I will have these for you in a week," he said. "And I know a man with a sawmill who owes me a favor. He will get you your timbers." It was not an offer of charity. It was a transaction of mutual respect. As the weeks turned into months, her solitary life began to acquire a quiet rhythm, punctuated by the slow formation of community. Agnes, the storekeeper, would set aside the freshest vegetables for her. Mark would stop by on his way to fish, inspecting her stonework with a critical but approving eye. She also met Elias, an old trapper who lived deep in the woods. He had watched her from a distance for weeks, curious about the smoke rising from the quarry. One day he appeared at the edge of her clearing, a brace of rabbits in his hand. He was a repository of local lore. He told her the stories of the quarry, of the curse, and of Silas Kane. "Folks said he was mad," Elias said, his voice a dry whisper like rustling leaves. "But I think he was just quiet, like you. This land doesn't care for loud folk." He taught her which plants were edible, how to read the weather in the clouds, and the best places to find dry firewood. He respected her solitude because he shared it. One crisp autumn afternoon, a horse and buggy clattered up the trail. It was the county clerk from the courthouse, the man who had sold her the deed. He was there for a tax assessment, his face a mask of bureaucratic indifference. He stopped short when he saw the way station. Where there had been a crumbling ruin, there now stood a solid, beautiful stone cottage, smoke curling cheerfully from its new chimney. The windows were glazed, the door was solid oak, and the grounds were cleared and tidy. He stared, his mouth slightly agape. He walked around the structure, tapping a wall with his knuckle as if to test its reality. He saw the neat stacks of firewood, the beginnings of a garden. The order wrested from chaos. He looked at Elara, at her steady gaze and capable hands, and for the first time, the mocking smile was gone from his face. It was replaced by a look of utter, baffled astonishment. He could not reconcile the worthless pile of rubble he had sold with the thriving homestead before him. He completed his assessment in a stunned silence, his scribbling hasty and clumsy. He left without a word, his worldview thoroughly shaken. The quiet victory was more satisfying than any argument could have been. The first true test came with the winter. It arrived not with a gentle dusting of snow, but with a furious blizzard that raged for 3 days, followed by a sudden, unseasonable thaw. The snowpack in the high peaks melted in a torrent, and the river that ran through the valley below became a raging, brown monster. From her high vantage point at the quarry, Elara watched as the water rose, swallowing fields and roads. Then, with a groan of tortured timber, the town's only bridge was swept away. The town was cut off. Supplies, and more importantly, the doctor, were on the other side. Panic began to set in. Elara knew she had to do something. She consulted Silas Kane's journal. In it, he described the quarry's geology in minute detail, including a high, stable rock shelf on her side of the river that directly faced a similar outcrop on the other, narrowing the gorge to less than 200 feet. It was a natural anchor point. She loaded her mule with heavy coils of rope, pulleys, and the ironwork Merrick had made for her. She met him and Elias at the river's edge. The roar was deafening. "It's impossible," Merrick shouted over the din. "Nothing can cross that." "We don't have to cross it. We have to go over it," Elara yelled back. She explained her plan: a heavy-duty Tyrolean traverse, a rope and pulley system anchored to the rock shelves. It was an engineering problem, one of tension and load-bearing capacity. It was a problem she knew how to solve. Using her father's plumb bob to sight the line, and Silas's knowledge of the bedrock to choose the anchor points, she directed the work. Merrick, with his immense strength, drove the iron pythons deep into the rock. Elias, with his trapper's skill, expertly threw a light guide rope across the chasm. For hours they worked, soaked by the spray, the furious water churning below them. It was brutal, dangerous work. But under Alara's calm, confident direction, a thick, strong cable was soon stretched taut across the gorge. She tested it herself, pulling herself across in a makeshift harness, the water seeming to claw at her boots. She secured the other side, and the lifeline was complete. For the next week, the rope bridge was the town's salvation. Supplies, medicine, and people were ferried across. Alara's quarry became the staging point, her home a temporary shelter for those stranded. She worked tirelessly, organizing the effort, her quiet competence a calming influence on the panicked townspeople. She was no longer the strange, solitary woman from the cursed quarry. She was the one who had saved them. She had used her inheritance, the skills from her father, the resources from Silas Kane, and the strength of the community she had quietly built, to bridge the divide. She had built a fortress not of stone, but of competence and connection. Years passed. The seasons turned, each one leaving the quarry more beautiful, more alive. The way station was a warm and inviting home, filled with the scent of baking bread and wood smoke. Alara had terraced the old quarry pit, turning the stark granite walls into a series of lush, green gardens that cascaded down towards the clear, deep pool. The roar of the Widow's Vale was no longer a sound of menace or mockery. It was the steady, reassuring heartbeat of her home. She was no longer alone. Merrick, Elias, and Agnes were her family now, their bonds forged, not in blood, but in shared work and mutual respect. Travelers would sometimes come to see the legendary quarry and the woman who had tamed it, and they would find not a curse, but a place of profound peace and startling beauty. She had become a quiet pillar of the community, a person sought out for her practical wisdom and her unshakable calm. One quiet evening she sat before her hearth, the fire casting a warm glow on the stone walls she had built with her own hands. On the heavy timber mantelpiece, two objects sat side by side. One was her father's brass plumb bob, its surface gleaming, a symbol of the integrity and truth he had passed down to her. The other was Silas Kane's geologist hammer, its polished head and worn handle a testament to a kindred spirit's resilience and vision. They were the sum of her two inheritances, one of skill, the other of purpose. She thought of the cold, dismissive look on the clerk's face, of the prospectors who had called this place worthless. They had seen only ruin, a cursed folly. They had not seen the potential locked within the stone, the legacy hidden behind the water. Her father had taught her that true wealth was not something you could hold in your hand, but a skill you held within you. Silas Kane had shown her that a legacy was not just what you left behind, but the life you enabled someone else to build. She had come to this place with nothing but a satchel of tools and $1,000 born of an ending. She had invested a small fraction of it in a pile of rocks. It was, she knew with a deep and abiding certainty that settled into her very bones, the best money she had ever spent.